The COVID-19 pandemic devastated most parts of the world. Governments spent billions trying to help in procuring the drugs from pharmaceutical companies who were developing these vaccines. Now, there are mounting calls for transparency by activists who say that governments need to disclose what was in those contracts. And so, we are going to try and find out this morning as to exactly what the government should be doing and saying at this time, because the matter has been taken to court. Let's speak now to convener of the Progressive Health Forum, Dr. Aslam Dasoo, who joins us for this conversation. Dr. Dasoo, thank you very much for your time. This was at the height of the global coronavirus pandemic, and as I've already said in that introduction, governments desperate to vaccinate their populations. Do you think that our health department is justified in keeping these vaccine contracts secret?
Good morning. I think there's a huge interest globally since the pandemic around how pharmaceuticals are procured and how they're purchased and the ramifications of contractual agreements between particularly states and big pharmaceutical companies. This has been a long-standing matter, but I think what the pandemic did was make it front and center, and I believe that the court action brought by Health Justice Initiative is an important contribution to getting some clarity on a number of issues, in particular the contractual arrangements, and second, the way our government procured the vaccines. And there's a lot to be said about both of those.
And it's exactly the kind of detail I'd like for us to explore this morning. Just reading that article on the front page of the Business Day yesterday, the critics say that the onerous conditions that were placed on governments at the time, these were simply too onerous and could have far-reaching implications for future pandemics. So, what kind of problems do we foresee going forward?
All right, so this was a bit of an unusual situation, of course, with the pandemic, the way it developed and caught everyone off guard. Contractual arrangements are notorious for maintaining confidential clauses, particularly for the pharmaceutical manufacturers. And I think what happened here was because there was such a rapid development of these vaccines that, new innovations in the contracting emerged. So contracting will typically cover how the medicines or vaccines are procured, stored, transported, and safely administered. That's common cause. Then in addition to that, there'll be clauses related to purchase price and indemnity. And I think that last one certainly, evoked a lot of interest and sometimes even great concern. And if you consider that it takes a manufacturer some 10 to 12 years in the normal course to develop a vaccine, because a very linear R&D process, you go step by step. Here, they put all the steps in parallel because of the urgency, and applied great innovation at great cost, and the US mainly did this, to produce these vaccines. However, when they sold them, the contractual arrangements, and this is a case around the world, not just in South Africa, were very, very specific. You don't get a vaccine unless you indemnify the manufacturer against any adverse events that may arise from this. From the manufacturer's point of view, one can see how they want to mitigate risk, but it has important public health and public policy implications as well. And I think this action here, others like it, have occurred worldwide, haven't been too successful. The law of contract here is very well developed. So one can't say how the courts will rule on this matter.
And the element I'd like to deal with last, Dr. Dasoo, is exactly what you've just brought up, indemnifying the manufacturers from liability. That's crucial. But before we get there, there is obviously the financial element to this. This is why it's important. The Health Minister, Dr. Joe Phaahla, telling Parliament recently that more than 22 million doses worth an estimated 3.2 billion are about to go to waste. Why? Because I suppose the COVID period, for many of us, we think that, it's a thing of the past and we no longer need to go and vaccinate. Does government have any recourse? This is a massive amount of money, 3.2 billion, that's about to go to waste.
Yes, I don't think there's any possibility the manufacturers will take the vaccines back. And I don't think that the government procured too much vaccine either. The fact is that during the period when vaccination had to be rolled out extensively, there were shortcomings, and particularly around communication. And of course, in a society like ours, where there's varying understanding of the importance of vaccines, one needs a far more nuanced and innovative communication approach. Ours was pretty corporate, sticking ads on TV, and didn't really get to the people in the idiom that they were used to. So we've got this huge amount of surplus vaccines that will expire. I see that they have extended the expiration date, which is perfectly normal and rational. But I don't think there'll be such an uptake that we can get rid of this surplus. So we've lost this money. And I think the more important thing here, Xoli, about this particular action is that it will force the government, if the court action is successful, to disclose what he paid for these vaccines. We don't know. There's a lot of speculation that's in the contracts. 26 billion rand was allocated to an interministerial team to purchase vaccines. Now, we have no insight into how that money was spent. And I think this is an important public accountability process that we must go through. I don't think the government will be disadvantaged in any of this. Transparency is good. I think the pharma companies will fight this, of course. They want to maintain maximum control of the information here. And it's going to be a very important outcome. I don't have high hopes, but one does remain hopeful that we can get to know more of this, especially for the future. And because, pandemics are going to be part of our lives, and we may not see one in the next 10 years again of this nature. We might. We don't know. And so we need some kind of approach that we can use quickly, transparently, and accountably to purchase the necessary protective medications we need in that event.
Final question, Dr. Dasoo. The protection of manufacturers from liability. It talks to that point that I said we were going to deal with last, which is indemnity.
Yes.
So, surely this is a valid cause to fight for by the Health Justice Initiative, which has taken the Health Department to court. Why? Because human life is front and center of this equation. Is that not important?
Of course it is. I don't think the pharma companies would deny that either. I think the indemnity they seek, let's accept this. Every medicine, whether it's the over-the-counter medicine or the high-tech medicine in a theater or ICU, has side effects. You will have adverse reactions in a small or larger portion of those who use it. And I think, pharma companies can't guarantee in no way, scientifically or otherwise, that won't happen. So it's an understandable proposition that, listen, we're going to give you this medicine. These are the side effects we've recorded, but we don't want to take liability should that occur. So you need to take that liability off our hands. And I think they may have been a little bit too harsh in that, and I don't think the governments were able to push back in that emergency situation. They needed the vaccines. They couldn't have interminable negotiations. And I think the pharmaceutical companies use that to their advantage. So we want to see exactly how the contractual arrangements indemnify them here, whether they are valid and whether they can be tested, whether they suit domestic law and even international treaties. So it's about a process of discovery. Yeah. And the more we discover, the better informed we'll be. I don't think we should rush to judgment. I think that must be the court's discretion. But the action brought by Health Justice Initiative is fully supported at this time, I think, by the entire healthcare fraternity.
Dr. Aslam Dasoo, let me thank you very much for your time, convener of the Progressive Health Forum. All right.